Well, we said we were going to have a look at some of the other things going on. Is it where we got to last week in terms of things have moved on for Trump? What are his options really as to where we are
Yes.
now?
Yes.
Because you remember when we were speaking last week, we were looking at the objectives, and I think we came up with a few objectives. One was regime change, as it was at the time, because he'd spoken a lot about helping those poor wretches who were out on the streets. Help is on its way, and he was talking about them rising up, wasn't he? He was trying to encourage them to. They'd never have a better opportunity. And in fact, I believe Netanyahu has done that again in the last couple of days. They'd never have a better opportunity to rise up and overthrow the Ayatollahs. One of the other objectives was to get rid of the nuclear program, which supposedly had been obliterated 6 months ago, but to finally put the death knell in that. Ballistic missile program as well, which he wanted to get rid of. Specifically, I think Netanyahu wanted to demolish that so that they couldn't, in any future conflict, be shooting missiles off towards Jerusalem and Tel Aviv and what have you. And then there was this objective actually, which has come up in sort of, it was on the back burner last week, but it's come to the fore a bit more. And there's this talk that there was some preemption of Iran attacking them. Trump's been talking about. I'm quite sure whether it would have been attacking Israel or would have been attacking the US bases in the Gulf.
Okay.
There's some suggestion that because he was talking yesterday about when part of the reason they'd done it was that he'd been talking to Steve Witkoff and Jared, and they'd told him that they were going to attack them. Quite where this information, CIA, it seems, don't get a look in nowadays in terms of advising the president on what might happen or what might not happen. It's an estate agent golfing buddy, and his son-in-law who are the ones who advise him on all these things.
Okay.
So they were the sort of objectives that we were looking at last week, and I thought we'd sort of have a look through and see where we are on these. And so if we're looking at what Trump might be looking to do in the next short period of time, has he dealt with, or would he say he's dealt with, the ballistic missile threat to Israel?
I saw some stats this morning that said that the number of missiles being launched, the number of drones being launched out of Iran had significantly decreased. Now, that doesn't mean that they aren't able to, but it is just interesting and perhaps a sign that either they are conserving their armaments or their capability to launch them has been significantly degraded. So
that's interesting, isn't it? Because it could be because we've had lots of talk this morning about the Straits of Hormuz and these tankers. There's 6 tankers or ships been attacked in the last 24 hours in the Straits of Hormuz, and they've been attacked by a combination of these Shahid drones and also these speedboats that the Iranians use to speed up and attach things to tankers and ships and sort of speed off. Little dinghy type affairs. So the Americans have made a big play about how they've taken out Iran's navy, but there's apparently thousands of these little boats and what have you that are flying around the Straits of Hormuz. Now, I guess one of the arguments that's being made is that the longer the Iranians can keep this going, the longer they can keep this war going, the more it's going to prove to be a defeat for Trump, because he's not going to get what he wants, and it gets closer and closer and closer to the midterm elections, and it will also start to hit the American and European economies as well. So he'll be receiving pressure. What you're saying could be true, that they've got less of these things to be able to fire off, or as you rightly point out, maybe, just maybe, this was part of the long game that they're playing, as you said, to keep them in reserve, to keep the whole thing rolling along. Because if he pulls out next week and they continue to attack ships in the Straits of Hormuz, he's going to look a bit daft, isn't he?
Yeah, well, that's the scenario that no one's really thinking about. They come up with all these different scenarios, but that's the one where he pulls out. He said it's been a fantastic victory, knocked out all these missiles, knocked out all his capability, 99% of objectives achieved. Iran say, well, just because you've gone doesn't mean that we're not going to continue to block the Straits of Hormuz and for reasons best known to them, bomb other countries in the Middle East.
Yeah.
So yes, and then he will look very stupid because energy prices will continue to stay high, and the whole world's economy. No one really wins, do they?
No.
I don't know who wins in that scenario.
Well, Russia, they're the only people who win because they're getting more for their oil, aren't they? In that regard, but
yes.
They're the only people who can look at it slightly on the bright side. China are losers because they've got to pay a lot more because they get a lot of Iranian oil, a lot more for their oil on the world market.
From the Middle East overall. Yeah. Norway, I suppose they'd be winners.
So moving on, so we looked at that option, so that could go either way. The nuclear argument, the uranium, the program that was supposedly obliterated 6 months ago. It's interesting that nobody's mentioned this processing of uranium and the underground. Supposedly, I heard somebody yesterday saying, I think it was Trump himself, saying that they put them underground under granite, very strong granite and what have you. So whether he's backing away from that or whether he still feels that he's obliterated it, or we're not quite sure what's happening. Nobody's mentioning the nuclear program, are they?
Not really. And as unfortunately, we'd like to inform listeners and watchers, but we can't possibly know, can we? You take his word for it when they had that mission in 2025. In fact, I also heard that he was thinking of sending special forces in to, I mean, that just seems bizarre. Special forces to find and knock out this uranium.
Yeah.
That would suggest that the bunker busting bombs either haven't found it or couldn't get through. Didn't bust the bunker. So that's just totally strange. But you're right, he hasn't mentioned it as much
because that was ostensibly, when we roll back 6 months, that was what this was all about, wasn't it? They're never going to have a nuclear weapon. It wasn't anything to do with any of the other stuff that subsequently they've been tacked on as objectives. It almost feels as though they've been tacked on as objectives because they haven't been able to deal with the primary one. And they come. And I mean, the third tip, I guess, that I think of is the regime change, which has not been very successful, has it really?
Well, it's changed, but it's the same regime, isn't it? And if you think about it, the new Khomeini, no one's seen him yet, by the way.
No
one's seen him because they reckon he's
just this morning that he might be dead as well.
So. Well, really, I haven't heard that one. But assuming he's still alive, I would imagine he is, because I can't imagine the panel of experts, as they call them, would have appointed him otherwise. But he lost his father, his mother, I think his sister, his brother, and close family and advisors. So the thought of this guy being pro-West, pro-USA, I think is for the birds. And if he wasn't radical enough already, I think he's going to be even more so, isn't he?
Well, you would have thought so. He's got enough grievance there, haven't he, really?
And it was almost immediately after the president said, I wouldn't mind a say in choosing the next leader, wasn't it? It was.
Yes.
Yeah.
This is like a two-finger salute, isn't it, really?
Yes, I think it is a two-finger salute. So regime change, as we said last week, it needs one or both of the Revolutionary Guard and the regular army to take the side of the people, because without military backing, it's not going to happen. And I haven't seen any signs of that.
There's no evidence of any of that.
No evidence of that.
Talk earlier in the week, I think it was fanciful, about the Kurds rising.
The Kurds, yes,
the country. Which who'd want to be a Kurd? I mean, I don't know whether you remember the Marsh Arabs when they were meant to be rising up against Saddam Hussein. The Americans at the time then were saying, "Rise up, rise up, rise up," and they were all slaughtered in the hundreds of thousands, and the Americans did nothing about it. Who'd want to be a Kurd now, rising up against much bigger population? I can't see that happening. I don't think the diplomacy is going to work. So here we go then. I'm going to put you on the spot now because we're reaching the penultimate end of this particular segment.
Yeah.
What's your prediction as to where we go from here?
I think I said this last week, I think it'll go on a little bit longer. Trump will declare some sort of victory, whatever's the easiest thing to package up at that time, the Americans and the Israelis will go home, and then we'll be left with what are the Iranians going to do? And that will become the unknown. And I see that as a few weeks away because, and be quick, Trump can see what's happening with energy prices and his economy and the world's economy. And even Mr. Trump doesn't want that attributed to him.
I'd agree with that. I think there's a realization, though, of what we were talking about earlier, that if he pulls out from this, that doesn't mean that the Iranians are finished. The Iranians want relief from sanctions to be able to get their economy to work, to be able to say, because that's what these protests were all about in the first place. They turned into something else, but they were initially all about the state of the economy. They want relief from sanctions to be able to get their economy to work properly again. And I think that's that will be their objective after the Americans have packed up and gone home. And if they continue to disrupt tankers going through the Straits of Hormuz, Trump is beginning to look as though he might not come out of this smelling of roses.
Quite the opposite. Ah, good.